in this particular section, you basically had to put them in slope-intercept form. Notice number 1 already gives you the slope and the y-intercept. Number 2 gives you a slope and a point. And notice I used the point slope form down here, and then I solved for y after I plugged them in. On number 3 and number 4, again on number 3, you have 2 points. You have to find the slope first. Then I used a point and the new slope to put them in slope-intercept form, or sorry, point slope form, and then you just follow the order and solve for y. On number 4, it gave you a slope of 0, y-intercept of -8. You plug it in to your slope-intercept form. The 0 times x cancels out, and you're left with y is equal to -8. On number 5 and number 6, you have to write it in slope-intercept form. Well, notice I subtracted x on both sides, solved for y by dividing by -1. And then on number 6, basically divided everything by -2. I looked for my slope, my y-intercept, or my b, plotted those, and then plotted the line using the slope. On number 7, this is number of students versus cost. So f of x is your cost, x is your number of students. The 300 is your y-intercept. That's the initial amount. That's what I have right here. And then the cost, which is your change in y over change in x, that's this 10, so 10 over 1. So it's $10 here for every one student. And that's what the slope means. On this page, write an equation in point slope form. Well, you don't have to solve for y. You just plug it into the slope, or just plug in the slope and the coordinate point like I did, and just leave it. You're not having to solve for y. On number 9, same thing. I gave you a point and a slope. You just plug it in and leave it. On number 10, we're going backwards, so I give you the point slope form. You have to find the point. Remember, this is x minus 2, so the opposite of that is a positive 2. This is y minus 1, so the opposite of minus 1 is a positive 1. And that's the coordinate point that I started off with at 2, 1, which is right there. I used a slope of -2 over 1 to find all the other points, and then drew a line connecting them all. Number 11, I did the same thing. Used the point, found my slope. Notice the x is -1. And the y would be -3, and that's the coordinate point that I used, a slope of 2, 1 as well, and graphed it accordingly. On this page, you have to write the equation in slope-intercept form. You're given 2 coordinate points for number 12 and 13, so for both of these, find the slope first. Then you're going to use slope or point slope form, plug in the information you have, which is the slope, and the x and the y, and then you're going to solve for y to put it in slope-intercept form. On number 14, notice 0 years is the starting point of 1995, and it increases by 5 years. On A, write it in point slope form. Notice I chose the point of 0, 118. My change in y was 6. My change in x was 5, so 6 over 5 was my slope. I just basically plugged it into the point slope form like it asked and left it alone. In B, I took that equation, I distributed the 6/5. 6/5 times x is 6/5 x. 6/5 times 0 is 0. I then added 118 to both sides, and here is my slope-intercept form. Then use the table in number 6. They want to know how many students will be in school in 2010. Well, if it increases by 5, this last one will be 2010. So if you add 6 plus 130, the answer would be 136. On number 15 and 16, we went over these in class. You basically have to find the slope of each single one and find the 2 that are parallel. Same thing on number 16. However, there were 3 of them that happened to be parallel. This one I had to solve for y in order to find the slope. On number 17, you're looking for perpendicular lines. Well, a horizontal line with a 0 slope and an undefined slope are perpendicular. And then on number 18, again, you find the slopes first. and then you look for the 2 or maybe 3, it could be more than 2, that have negative reciprocals of each other. On this particular problem, you want to find a line that is perpendicular to Smith Avenue. Well, here's Smith Avenue, okay, and it told you that it goes through negative 14, 2, so if perpendicular would be a straight line up and down, and that is x equals negative 14, which is D. Finally, on this one, it's got to be parallel to Market Boulevard. Well, here's Market Boulevard, so it has to have the same slope. So I picked out 2 points of 6, 7, and 7, 0. I then found the slope of negative 7. I then eliminated the 2 that don't have slopes of negative 7. And then I know that it had to go through negative 1, 5, so I plotted that point right there. And I used my slope in order to find the next point. So I went down 7 to the right 1, and it crossed at negative 2, so therefore G was my answer. On this particular problem, it has to be parallel to Bear Street. Well, Bear Street is right here, and I know that that's a very flat slope. So what I did was, I know it's a positive slope, so I eliminated the negative slopes. Now I'm either C or D. And if you notice what I did, I just kind of drew a picture of what that might look like. If you start at 0, 0 and you go up 1 and to the right 7, you're going to get a very flat slope. If you go up 7 and over right 1, you get a very steep slope. So this graph right here looks like the very flat slope, and that's why I chose C as the answer. On this particular problem, I graphed both of them. And notice they're parallel because they have the same slope. However, the y-intercept went from negative 4 to positive 3. That is a shift upward of 7 units. On number 23, same slope, but it went from 0 right here to 3 right here. And so that's a shift up. We call that a translation of 3 units. This line right here is translated upward 3 units. On number 24, notice they have the same point. So this line rotated counterclockwise. Finally, I graphed the last one. Notice it went from the yellow line to the black line. It rotated clockwise. So it went, oh, and by the way, the black line here is less steep. This is more steep. The yellow line is more steep. The black line is less steep. The same thing would apply to number 24. It went from, it got more steep as it went along.